There's a financial opportunity that nobody's telling you about. It's better than crypto, it's better than stocks, and this opportunity is called healing your internal world. Every time we take on a lie, it's like reducing the image quality in like a movie you're watching. Those lies are weighing so hard on us that our perception becomes pixelated. We start seeing what we want to see rather than what's actually happening. Looking at your own mind to investigate your patterns, find out where they came from, and let go of other people's expectations so you can live the authentic, honest life that you want.
These demons that you face were created to help you feel safe.
This is exactly what we discuss in today's episode. Without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Charming Man podcast. This is Ege Reynolds, and I'm here with
Mr. Numer, who finally has his microphone in order.
That's right. We're here with improved audio and somewhat improved video. We're going to improve the setup of the podcast as we go along, but today we are going to talk about why healing is the best financial investment, is the best financial insurance policy. Now, obviously, this is not financial advice. Hopefully, no one in the US is about to sue us right now. But the point we want to make throughout this podcast is, a lot of us or a lot of people invest in stocks, they invest in crypto, they invest in all these funds, they invest in retirement accounts. And when they look at that, they see it as, oh, this is how I build my financial security. Whereas I think what we can all agree deep down is the way we build financial security is through improving our capabilities and also healing deep down. So we're actually putting our money into things we want to do rather than what we've been conditioned to do. So in this podcast, we're going to share some of our own experiences of certain ways in which we may have avoided feeling certain emotions and what we learned from that and different healing processes that you can use to build healthy beliefs. Where shall we start with, Mr. Numer?
A good place to begin would be what exactly do we mean when we say healing? Because, it's an overloaded word. Do we mean physical healing, emotional healing? So when you say healing, what are you referring to?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start this with acknowledging that the past few months, I think since February, we're in May now, I've been diving really deep into Kim Barta's work, who's been a psychotherapist for 30 years. And what's fascinating about him is he worked in these communities where he was in the same community for 20 years. So when he worked with someone and they had a one-on-one session, and in that moment, it felt like, okay, this problem's over, you've healed from this. He would actually see if that healing stuck for months or even years to come. So he built very advanced processes to help people let go of things. So a lot of what I might say in this podcast is not something I came up with on my own. It's something I've learned from his mentorship, and also just his content since I'm doing some one-on-one and group work with him. And what I will say is, yeah, you're right. Healing is quite, I think, misunderstood right now. And especially for men, a lot of men feel like healing is not something that's alpha or masculine. Like, come on, bro, just get on with it and be bigger than your fears. Why do you have to just sit there and integrate all these emotions? But I think when we talk about healing, you know, I made this post yesterday, and I think a lot of people have this life that they want and they wish they could have it. And they don't think they actually deserve it. That's why they wish to live that way. And a lot of what we think we deserve depends on what beliefs we hold deep down about ourselves, about the world, about other people. and how we act out those patterns. So I think as we heal, what happens is life becomes more peaceful, more effortless, and more of our authentic expression rather than living dreams of other people. Because, there was this article a long time ago that's super popular. Everyone talks about it. Regrets of people who are dying. This, I think, nurse had
Hmm.
interviewed people, right? And the number one regret was, I wish I lived a life true to myself and not based on the expectations of others. And I think healing is a big part of that because as we let go of all our emotional baggage, all our stories, and we get to generalize lessons from life experiences and not the triggers, that's when our life becomes more full. So, for example, a guy could meet a woman and they get into a relationship, and maybe eventually something happens and this woman ends up cheating. And he might go, oh, this means all women cheat. So, what he's doing in this situation is he's generalizing the trigger, the situation that caused an emotional reaction in him. And he's projecting that onto the outside world. What we want to do is to generalize the lesson and look at, hey, unfortunately, some relationships do involve cheating. I guess I was in that percentage. Did I do anything in my behavior that made it easy for me to attract that percentage of people? How can I change my behavior while realizing a big part of that was impersonal and it's just what happened and it can still be hurtful? But how do I not take that personally while integrating the lesson from it? And as we do this over and over and over again, what happens is our worldview becomes more colorful, becomes more vibrant. Because every time we take on a lie, it's like reducing the image quality in like a movie you're watching. Those lies are weighing so hard on us that our perception becomes pixelated. We start seeing what we want to see rather than what's actually happening. And that's what creates a lot of trouble for people. So I know that was a long answer, but did that answer your question?
Yeah, and you made a couple of very good points. And I'm going to rewind back a little bit
Mm-hmm.
where you first said, he was part of the community for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I really admire that is because a lot of research papers that I've read, for example, let's say in exercise science, they'll follow it for 4 months and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
arrive at a conclusion after 4 months. And the problem is, well, okay, maybe something worked for 4 months, but does it work for 4 years or 10 years?
Yeah.
And so it's very powerful to be able to follow, or, technically you would say to be able to follow your study subjects
Mm-hmm.
for a long period of time, because that really gives you a much more um, balanced perspective.
Yeah.
Now, the other very good point you made was when you heal, you learn to live the life that you want. Because I realized for me growing up, I grew up in a culture where academic achievement was very prioritized and celebrated.
Right.
And I was always, in the top of my class, but not the very first.
Mm.
So, in some ways, I was a good student, but not the best. And so I almost walked through life with a chip on my shoulder, being like, oh, I want to do this so that I can show people that even if you're not the top of your class, you can still achieve this prestigious thing.
Right.
And so much of my life was spent fighting that battle, saying, hey, I want to show people that you can have the come from the background I came from and still accomplish something. And then the more I healed and discovered love for myself, the more I realized, well, wait, I never actually wanted it for the things that I was chasing. I
Mm-hmm.
never actually wanted for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
was so busy trying to prove something to someone, to some, phantom in my head that didn't even exist, that I was just making my life miserable, trying to achieve something, to prove something to someone who was just living their life and,
Mm-hmm.
didn't even bother to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, healing does really play a big role in even just shifting your priorities
Mm-hmm.
towards saying, okay, what is it that I really want
Mm-hmm.
versus what is it that I want that I think will make people look up to me or make people treat me in a way that's going to make me feel worthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing Kim talks about, which is super interesting, every time I hear this, it sinks in deeper, is he says your life is built around your shadow. And we can look at that at a very surface level and see, okay, if you have a drinking problem, then yeah, you're probably avoiding something. If you have a problem with drugs, yeah, you're probably avoiding something with that. But it can also be very subtle things. So, for example, I built my own business because I didn't want to be told by anyone else, hey, you need to stay at work late and finish this, or receive a call at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday where I was about to go have dinner with some friends and be like, hey, we need to have this meeting. Sorry, you're going to need to change up your schedule because I valued being independent. But then why did I value that? It was from part of the experiences I had in childhood where I had to figure things out on my own and I couldn't actually rely on other people. So that allowed me to grow up a bit earlier, but it also created this life where I was building my own business and doing things in my own terms. So just because we talk about unconscious patterns or shadow, it doesn't mean these things will always lead you in a negative direction. Like, I'm very grateful this led me to building my own business, but it's always about awareness. Like, healing in its simplest form is, can you love what's coming up and can you shine awareness on it? Actually become curious about what's coming up instead of trying to shut it down, which is why it's sad to see the message of, oh, you have to fight your demons. If your inner bitch comes out, then you tell your inner bitch to disappear and then you keep running as well. It's good to have discipline, but those parts are not going to go away by trying to show them down. It's like trying to put, a lion in a cage and you think, oh, if I make the cage smaller, then it's not going to affect me as much. But eventually, as the cage gets smaller, the lion's getting really pissed off and it's just going to go crazy. And that's when
Yeah,
people create a lot of problems for themselves. They may have a part of themselves that they kept in check for so long, but because they didn't heal the underlying belief, it comes out, it takes over, and it creates problems in their lives. So, for anyone watching, one of the simple ways that you can become more aware of this is with anything you're doing, ask yourself, what is my subtle intention behind this? It can be as simple as maybe you're working at a coffee shop and you see everyone else around you talking to their friends, having fun, being social, and suddenly you're the only person there working, and you feel a little bit strange about that. You're like, huh, maybe I should end my work and have some more fun. And then you realize suddenly you just want to fit in. And people do so many things just because they want to fit in. We even have a term for it, right? Peer pressure, social pressure. We start doing things that we don't want to do just because that's what keeps us in a good relationship with a group. But when we become aware of our subtle intention behind every small behavior, that's when we can move towards a more authentic life, which involves, just like what you're saying, recognizing these expectations that you felt others had on you, you actually manufacture them based on an experience. And by realizing that you manufacture them, you can simply let go of them because you were the one who created that to begin with.
So before we chat about what you just said, could you talk more about what you mean when you say shadow?
Yeah, so shadow is the unconscious part of ourself that comes up in certain behaviors. And usually things can point to a shadow when we have strong emotional charge about something. So, for example, maybe you're having a conversation uh, at a social event, whatever, and someone starts being a little bit loud, and then you get really pissed off. You can be slightly frustrated, maybe that's a normal reaction, but something about this really puts you on edge. Or another example is, you know, maybe like someone says something and suddenly you're like, hey, how could you say that? Don't disrespect me like that. You get into an argument, which is why I find it funny when people think, other men who are loud are very strong and very grounded examples. Because usually when you're angry at something, you're triggered by it, and that trigger has you in its grip. So shadow is those unconscious patterns. There's also other types of disturbances. Again, this is from Kim's work that may come up. That's not shadow. Like, for example, you can have grief. Like, you leave a place that you really enjoyed. Suddenly, you can no longer drink some Topo Chico and walk on South Congress in Austin, Texas. And there's a part of you that misses that. So you feel grief around it. That's not shadow. That's just a regular experience of life. You can have biological disturbances, like you're having an amazing life. One day you're playing basketball, then you get injured, and then now your leg's in pain. You're not happy that your leg's in pain, but that's not shadow. That's just a biological disturbance. So shadows really those unconscious patterns that, if we are unaware of, feel like this is just our life. And they're the parts that we hold strong energetic charge around. So my shadow will be different than your shadow. And sometimes we can even have positive shadows. Like there's a concept of the golden shadow where a lot of guys do this actually, is they look at an attractive woman and they project all these amazing qualities onto her. And maybe deep down they yearn to be in a relationship. So they're like, "Oh, if I was in a relationship, I would have this, and I'd have love, and I'd have connection, and I'd have intimacy." And I used to do this before I figured more things out around socializing. I used to do this all the time. I was like, I'm going to find love. It's going to be great. I'm going to feel loved. I'm going to feel connection. That sounds incredible. But it's also a golden projection. You have love and connection and intimacy within yourself. So, yeah, that's what shadow's about. And it can look very different in different areas, which is
Yeah,
why it comes down always to our intention to recognize what's shadow for us and what's not.
yeah. And I do want to emphasize that just because it's called shadow as you already said, doesn't mean it's negative. So, I know um, I have strong reactions whenever I see someone not be congruent with what they stand for
Mm-hmm.
example, or when someone tells me, "Hey, this will be done by this time," and then they don't do it, and then instead of saying, "I'm sorry," maybe there's a lack of taking responsibility there. It's, is there shadow within me that gets quite annoyed when people do that? Yes. But is that still, it doesn't disqualify the fact that it's probably good to do things that you say you're going to do or
Mm-hmm.
be congruent with what you stand for. So I do really want to emphasize that even though there's shadow, it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it should be disowned. I think
Mm-hmm.
from what we work on, I realized that, okay, at the end of the day, it's still good to look for those qualities in people as well as build that in yourself, but to have more
Mm-hmm.
peace and I guess almost not lose your energy kind of getting upset over other people doing things like that. You can work on yourself to let go of almost that negative charge that's created when you see those actions.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, what you said there, whenever something in the outside world makes you irritated, frustrated, angry, or you feel judgmental towards something, that's usually a projection. So when there's a projection, which is a type of shadow, again from Kim's work, I didn't come up with this. Um, when a shadow is a projection, what we do is we re-own that. So we see that part inside ourselves. Or this is the part that's very interesting. We look at the complementary part. So for example,
Yeah,
if you really get irritated when people say something and don't do what they said they would do and they don't even show remorse about it, have you been in situations where you've sometimes done that? Or do you actually have a hard time letting yourself off the slack a bit and being more compassionate? And we re-own whichever part speaks to us the most, because sometimes we're angry about things that we also do, and sometimes we're angry or frustrated about things we would never let ourselves do. So based
yeah,
on what resonates, we re-own that part. And this is not because we're trying to be a holier than thou person. This is
yeah,
because when we're upset about this, when we're frustrated, our energy is leaking to that situation, that person, that environment, whatever it is. And when we can re-own that, we gain more vitality. Suddenly we
yeah,
have more energy to move through life. And then we can look at the value underneath that and go, I want to be with an integrity with my word, but not everyone has to be. Because when we're
yeah,
judging something, we're going, here is how I see the world. Everyone should see the world the same way I do. And
yeah,
separating your view from what others might see as reality is super helpful in first owning your view, but also secondly, understanding that you focusing on yourself in this way will just generate more output and efficiency in your life. So a lot of this healing is not just because it feels really good. It does. It feels really amazing to live the life you want rather than the life others want for you. But it also makes you a more productive, efficient person who can eventually make more money, build better relationships, and live the life that you want.
yeah. So when you say, let's say you see some behavior in someone and then you decide, okay, this triggers me because I do the complementary behavior of it. When
Mm-hmm.
you say you re-own it, what do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm. So you see it. inside yourself. So you go,
Yeah.
okay, actually, I do the complementary of this behavior. Like, for example, I used to be frustrated whenever I go to a restaurant and then some table would be like excessively loud. And I'd be like, can you not see there's other people here? Like, just be more
Yeah.
considerate. And then I looked at that situation and I realized there are situations in which it would actually help for me to be a little bit louder, but I'm afraid to let myself do that because I don't want extra attention on myself. So then I re-owned that. I saw that within myself. And then from there, you could look at whether that points to a value that you have as a person, or whether that belief that you were judging so harshly actually also came from someone else.
Yeah.
So we can look at that belief, and this is where we get into interjections, which is, a truth or a false information we take from the outside world, and then we live by that.
Yeah.
Because as kids, we're always receiving things from the outside world. Like that's how we learn. You're a baby, you're just lying in your family's arms, and then slowly your senses are coming to fruition. And at first, we're just receiving everything. And whatever we receive, we take on. So during that time, we may have received certain things that our parents thought were good for us, but maybe weren't the most useful for us.
Yeah.
And usually, those things come in the way of shoulds, have tos, can'ts, must, like, I should do the right thing, otherwise, I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
Or I must be perfect and otherwise I'm not good enough. Or I
Yeah.
have to always consider someone else's perspective before sharing my perspective. So
Yeah.
things like this. So, for example, with being more quiet, I realized when I was a kid, my mom with good intentions, she didn't want me to just cause chaos on the streets. So she'd be like, "Oh, be quiet. Don't make too much noise." Which makes sense. Like you don't want to be the one person where you're on the bus and your kid's just going crazy, right? But then I realized I took that on as a belief. Oh, I should be quiet. I shouldn't speak up. And see, there's a should here. So then,
Yeah.
with those shoulds, with the beliefs that we take from the outside world, this is where we do the reverse of the projection and we just give it back.
Yeah.
So we can imagine holding this belief in our hands and just giving it back to where it came from. And that's a very simplified way, but just you knowing, okay, if I react to the outside world, then I'm projecting, and it's good to re-own that. And if I'm feeling something inside me that restricts my expression, that that makes me feel weak, vulnerable, just not free flowing, and there's a should, must, or have to around it, then that's probably
Yeah.
something I took from the outside world. Having this distinction super powerful, so that based on the class of the shadow, this is what Kim talks about, we know what to do about it. And we're not
Right.
just going in blind and like, if you're a basketball team, right? You're going to switch up your strategy slightly based on the opponent. Like you played squash. Imagine you played the exact same way for every opponent you had. It wouldn't fit in all the situations. So now with our shadows, we can use different strategies for the different class of shadow that we're facing. And just for the sake of completion, there's a third class of shadow, which is split ego states, which is when one part of you wants something, the other part wants something else. Like a part of you wants a high income job at a tech company, and a part of you wants to quit your job and follow your passion. Those types of dilemmas.
Yeah. And, you know, introjections are quite interesting to me because I feel like part of maturing for me has been recognizing which of my beliefs are introjections.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I realized that this idea of always being super, super lean and
Mm-hmm.
that being um, the main metric for health and vitality, that was that was a belief I inherited from the world around me,
Mm-hmm.
or um, what are some other I think a common one is like saving every penny
Mm-hmm.
in every way possible without really understanding, okay, maybe you can spend the $2 extra and that'll save you 20 minutes more, and then you'll actually probably make way more of that back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so interjections have always been quite interesting because they part of really maturing for me and kind of developing my own worldview was understanding, okay, which of these just came from my environment versus which of these are beliefs that I genuinely tested and decided to hold.
Yeah. And this is where being aware of the content you're consuming is extremely important as well. Because there's so many interjections in anything, especially if you're not aware of what you're receiving. This comes down to all types of advertising. Like, for example, you see a beer commercial and LeBron James is about to drink some beer. LeBron James doesn't probably drink that beer, bro. Otherwise, he wouldn't look lean. Now, some people say he goes to the Mexican supplement store, so I don't know about that. But the associations that our mind makes go so deep. And this was part of the reason um, I would recommend guys when we were doing more, when we had the more social coaching stuff, to not consume anything outside of what we were giving them in the program. And here's the interesting part, right? The deeper you consume those interjections without seeing the outside world, what happens? You sink deeper and deeper and deeper into a belief system that now traps you into your living room, into your chair. And that's the story for a lot of guys is, first they learn about, oh, I could get better, I could live this amazing life. And then with that comes this, if I want that, I should do X, Y, and Z. If I don't meditate in the morning and then do a cold plunge and then do 3 rounds of Wim Hof, then I'm not good enough. I need to keep doing this. And then what happens? They keep watching that without doing it. So the belief that they're not good enough is now even more solidified. So it actually hurts them. And, it's if people are not aware of this, it's such a process that's so deep where people may not realize like their intentions are good, right? They want to get better, they want to learn. But then based on how the information's presented, it's like, okay, if you want to be a high value man, you need to do X, Y, Z. And if you're not doing that, well, guess what? No one's going to look at you. It's like, yeah, I guess, but that's not the full truth. So I think recognizing, like you said, those beliefs we take out from the outside world and just how deep they go. This could be in childhood, this could even be now. Like you may have friends who tell you, oh, speaking to a girl during the day is super creepy. I don't do that, bro. And they've never even spoken to a girl. Like the last girl they spoke to was like 5 years ago. But you're aware of their beliefs, and then those beliefs, what happens? Oh, I shouldn't speak to a woman during the day because that's creepy. Where did that
Yeah,
belief come from? What
yeah,
happens if you were to give it back?
yeah. And it's also, you know, given that so many existing beliefs are quite, or personally for me, I keep seeing it in the fitness realm just because, my attention has been there more lately with my life situation.
That's
There's such
right.
any craving we have is bad. Like there's this belief system that treats all of our cravings as almost a shortcoming that must be fought past, and that if you're not disciplined and you can't eat perfectly every single day, then there's something wrong with you. And the more you look into the biology of it, the more I've realized, wow, it's we have actual biological mechanisms that make us want to eat certain types of foods. Like there's reasons we see sugar and we go, yes,
That's right.
and they're not destructive biological mechanisms. Obviously, not health advice, but the more I study about leptin signaling and how cortisol actually affects our hunger perception, and I'm still working on understanding the study, but lots of cortisol even can trigger states of you can eat a lot of food and still not feel satiated.
Mm,
And so you're really moving away from this idea that any craving I have is almost a character deficiency
mm,
to a more integrated view that actually maybe these cravings exist for a reason, almost kind
mhm,
of like maybe these demons exist for a reason. It's similar, like maybe these cravings exist for a reason, that we want like very sugary food because we're just under a lot of stress and we need food that can be metabolized quickly for a lot of energy, or stored because we're just in such a stress state that the body thinks, oh, we don't know when we're going to get food again.
mm.
And so, that's kind of the cool thing I thought about this healing work was, in many ways, the patterns actually seem to repeat themselves in every aspect of life. Like these
Yeah.
demons that you face were created to help you feel safe. And maybe that's kind of the emotional way of seeing it. And then there's a similar pattern in our physical body, that actually a lot of these cravings and were almost adaptations to these adversities that we were facing. And so it isn't about looking at them and going, why are you here? Um, uh, why do you exist? But really looking at them with that compassion and seeing, oh, these were created for a reason. And once I can make friends with them, I can start to work through them in a much healthier way.
Yeah. And the stronger thing is not to try and push them down or to show them away. Your strength here is determined by how willing are you to see this part of you from the perspective of love and acceptance. Like, can you actually look at the part of yourself that feels weak at times as a man and actually love this part? As much as you love the part of yourself who's an absolute warrior and just gets after whatever you want to do. And that's super powerful because eventually what this creates is every part of you is loved for sheer existing, which is kind of what a baby's supposed to get from a parent in an ideal world. So we can actually fix our past by fixing the present, because what we do in the present changes our interpretation of the past. And then from this place, we become more functional human beings. Just like you said with health, if we understand the purpose behind these things and how to actually work with them, then it's so much easier to move through life and understand yourself, understand your own body, understand your own mind. And this is why the title of this podcast is Healing is the Best Financial Investment, or Why Healing is the Best Financial Investment. The thing is, if we look at what most people spend their money on, what is it? I lived in Austin for a year, and here's what I've seen. Go out twice a week, go party with the boys, have a girls' night out. Sunday, maybe some bottomless mimosas. Hit on the mare while you're trying to get your bottomless mimosa. This happened all the time, guys. The mare was absolutely crushing um, that time there. But there's that, right? Drinking, alcohol. The alcohol industry wouldn't exist if people had no avoidance patterns. What's the second thing? Smoking. And it's getting more and more prevalent now. People don't even smoke like a real man. Now they have these pouches that they utilize. And there's research on, how that's causing problems, especially for guys, along with all the lung problems. So it's like
Yeah,
imagine paying money to get this thing that you know will hurt you. Why would you do that? Avoidance mechanism. So there's alcohol, there's smoking, whatever you're smoking. There's going to the club. Oh, yeah, thumbs up. Even the AI agrees. There's going to the club and buying a table just to look cool to other people. You want that attention on yourself. There's the money you spend on that. There's money spent on traveling to a place that you don't actually want to go to, but it sounds cool. Maybe what you really want to do is go to a random rural town in Portugal. But then what would look cool on your Instagram feed is, oh, let's go to Paris or let's go to London and take all these cool pictures. There's the money spent on that. There's the money spent on fitness industry. People going on TRT or steroids or just trying to get as big as they can. While in their mind, they're still small. There's the
yeah,
money spent on that. There's the money spent on that 1800 leather jacket when the cashier smiles at you and she's a blonde girl that you think is interested in you. So you just swipe your credit card right away. And next thing you know, wait, how did you actually buy this? When we're not aware of these patterns, we end up spending our money, our time, our energy on all these avoidance patterns. And as we heal, a simple day becomes the best day of your life. All you need
yeah,
is some tea with a friend, having a conversation, getting work done, taking a walk outside, going to the gym, doing some meditation, maybe socializing a bit. And that experience feels as good as if you were, in the club and everyone knew you and everyone wanted your attention. Because now that experience of fulfillment is coming from yourself and not from the outside world. And this is why healing is the best financial investment you can make.
yeah. And I think, you know, the stereotype around healing is that it's just a bunch of sitting in a room talking and it has no carryover impact to the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's possible to do anything incorrectly and have it just be something you do, in a basement,
Mm-hmm.
um, when done right, it can be profoundly impactful. So, I know in my case, um, food used to be a big one where I'd feel an emptiness inside because what I really wanted was connection.
Mm.
But then instead of getting connection, I'd get a handmade pan pizza with like roasted chicken and roasted red peppers, thinking,
Yeah.
once I eat this pizza, that emptiness within me will disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And, plot twist or spoiler alert, it didn't do anything to the emptiness and actually made me only feel worse for thinking, oh, I can just eat a pizza and be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Same with like a scuba diving license that I went and bought and
What, you
spent,
have a scuba diving license?
yeah,
I had no
um,
idea.
and spent a decent bit of cash on. It was purely just avoidance thinking. Once I get this license, then I'll feel good about myself instead of feeling that emptiness because I didn't feel the connection with people that I wanted to
Mhm.
feel. And so, even though healing is something that's more of this sit down, take a pause, work through your emotions, it doesn't make it any less powerful than more external world based activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like you're on a road trip and you could keep going, and you think that's going to be the faster way. But then every now and then you check your map and you're like, is this where we want to go or is this where we want to go? And that checking the map is checking in with your inner world to see, okay, is this coming from a healthy pattern? What is there to be healed about this? And how can I live the life that I want long term? And that's what creates the difference. Like you said, I forgot about that. Certifications, classes you don't care about, going to university, 4 years of university if you're studying a random major just because you don't know what to do and your family's like, you need to go to school. People spend so much money avoiding the healing process. And if we can let go of that avoidance, look at our subtle intention, then we may not be saving money right now or investing in stocks, but we're investing in our own ability, our own stock to enjoy the life that we want. Because as you heal, you just don't need as many outside world things. Like I travel around, I have a suitcase of stuff, and that's more than enough. I walk into the mall, I can see something expensive that looks cool. I don't need to buy it. Me and my friend I'm in Poland with, every night we get pitched going into the club every night. They never give up. Hey boys, come to the club. We're like, no. And we're probably hardest people to sell because we genuinely don't need it. And I think that comes through healing your inner world so that what you experience becomes fulfilling from the inside. And then you end up saving so much time, money, energy on doing the things you actually didn't want to do to begin with.
Yeah. And paradoxically, that often accelerates the results in the external world.
Yeah, exactly. Because now you have a unit headed towards the same direction. And you don't have a unit where like someone wants to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes. Someone's vegan, so they're not eating meat and they want their own food. So now they're fighting with whoever organized the food. Someone's like, oh, I actually don't want to go to this place. I'm just going to do something by myself. You have something that's organized. Like most people's mind inside look like a traffic intersection in Asia. There's like motorcycles going from everywhere, people yelling across the street at each other. Everyone's honking. You think you're going to get run over, and you think the solution is, man, I need some soundproof headphones. I need to double soundproof headphones to get rid of this and to focus. People think that's discipline. Whereas by healing, you can create a mind that's quiet and it just feels like you're in a spa throughout your day. How much easier would it be to get your goals then versus being in that busy intersection trying to tune everything out? And that's what the healing makes a difference for. You change your internal environment, which then changes your external environment because these two parts are absolutely connected.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Cool. Any final points for today? I know this these comments were so fire that your laptop's running out of battery. So,
It's literally overheating.
mm, any comments to wrap this up?
I'd say, really, in many ways, this division we have between the external world and internal world is a division made so that it's easier to look at them as independent parts and easier for us to comprehend them. But at the end of the day, that there really are these two deeply interconnected wholes that
Mm,
benefit from improvement. And so just because you're doing inner work doesn't mean it's going to have not going to yield anything in the external world because they're
mm,
so because really there's just a world. And so don't think of inner work as sacrificing um, results in the external world. Think of it
mm,
almost as a force multiplier to allow you to achieve things well with more peace and sometimes faster.
mm-hmm. And to achieve what you want to begin with.
Yeah,
Like, take out all the time you would have spent achieving, working towards, putting in effort, energy, time into things you didn't want. Throw that away. Whoa, you have so much energy and time now. What do we do with this, right? So, healing is super powerful if you want to become more aware of how you can heal and how to get started on this process. Start looking at your subtle intention. Look at what you use as avoidance mechanisms. And when you feel like you're about to do it, see yourself from unconditional love as best as you can. We're not attacking the avoidance mechanism here. What we're doing is how do we actually look at what are we trying to avoid by doing this behavior? And then that gets us deeper into resolving the problem. And then we can go, whatever we're trying to avoid, how are we actually manufacturing that? Because there's actually nothing in the external world that's supposed to trigger us. We always create that trigger. There could be some things that's frustrating, but there's probably someone else in the world who would have gone through the same experience you experience with a lot less emotional charge. So as we go deeper into that journey, we get to see what's the underlying belief. And based on the class of the shadow, we can go through the healing process. I know we are having some technical difficulties, so we need to wrap up. But if you guys enjoy this, we're happy to revisit this subject deeper at a future time. And if you want us to help you become the man who can be the best version of himself while feeling whole inside, go to my Instagram, DM me TCM, and I can tell you about TCM Academy and how we can help you. Thank you guys for listening. This is Ege,
this is Numer.
and this is the Charming Man podcast. Cheers, guys.